Hello Year 4 and welcome to your final English lesson of this week. I hope you've enjoyed learning about all the features of a diary just as much as I have. To end this week we are going to learn or recap how to write in an informal style. Now we did have some practice on this, but if we think our minds back all the way to September last year, that was when we last did it. So it's been a while. So by the end of this lesson, you will be able to explain the different features that are used in both formal and informal language. You will be able to explain when we would use formal and informal language, in what circumstances or what genres of writing. You will be able to write sentences which are in a formal style into an informal style. And you will also be able to use informal language correctly when writing a letter to your friend. I do just have some quick retrieval here for you. So number 1, number 2 and number 3. If what you could do is underneath your date and your title for today, which I know all of you would have written by now, you can write the subheading retrieval practice. And then you can write number 1, 2 and 3, and then you can write your answers, just so I can see that you've been doing your retrieval, okay? So pause the video and do that now, please. Okay, so using the image in the top right hand corner, what does this image tell us about what the word surreptitiously means? Well, we've learnt this word before in our reading, and we can see this child is trying to get some cookies from the cookie jar without being noticed. That is what surreptitiously means, in a way that you attempt to avoid notice or attention. Number 2, give a definition for what a flint is. Now, some of us were getting a bit confused on what a flint is. A flint is not a type of fire. Flint is a hard grey rock. It's quite sharp and it can be used to make a fire with steel. Finally then, what does an expanded noun phrase need, and give an example of one? Well, hopefully you will have remembered that an expanded noun phrase needs a determiner, such as the or a, 2 adjectives, both separated by 1 comma, and then followed by the noun that the 2 adjectives are describing. So an example is the juicy ripe apple. The is my determiner, juicy and ripe are my adjectives, separated by a comma in between them both, followed by my noun, which was my apple. And I've got my full stop there too. So today we are going to be looking at what formal and informal language is. Now I wonder if you can remember the difference between these types of languages, because they are complete opposites, okay? So I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes now. Pause the video and just have a think. What is the difference between formal and informal language? Pause the video now and have a think. Okay, how did you get on? Did you remember that formal language is used for more serious purposes? So, for example, if we're speaking to Mr. Day, we would speak in a more of a formal language than if you're speaking to your friends. When we are writing in a formal language, we need to make sure that we use the correct grammar and standard English. So we don't use these slang words that you might use. That is when we are writing informal language. Because when we are using informal language, we use it for more casual and less serious purposes. So when we are writing in English, we have used mostly all formal language so far. But a diary entry is written using an informal language because it's a less serious purpose for the writing. And when we're writing this diary entry using our informal language, we can use this chatty language to really connect with who we're talking to. Because when you write your diary, you will be writing it almost like to your future self, because you'll be writing it Dear Diary. So you'll be writing it for maybe someone to look at when you see someone, when you eventually, hopefully, fingers crossed, get rescued from the rainforest. Okay? Now, your first task today is using what you already know and what you remember about formal and informal language, and what we've just recapped on what the definitions of formal and informal language are. Can you identify out of these 6 features which are formal language and which are features of informal language? Now, this is task number 1 on your resource sheet for today. So I have got this page in your resource pack. So what you can do, above each sentence, you can just write whether it's formal or informal. Okay, so can you pause the video and have a go at doing that now based on what you can remember and what we've just discussed? Off you go. Okay, how did you do? So did you think that when we use correct grammar and punctuation, this is when we are writing in a formal style? However, even though we are using correct grammar and punctuation in a formal style of writing, we also need to make sure that we still use the right punctuation when we are writing in an informal language. So going back to our formal language, they also use a serious tone. So if you're speaking to Mr. Day, or if you're writing a letter to the Prime Minister, you might use a more serious tone of voice to come across. You might have your shoulders back and you might come across like you're a bit more mature in your tone of voice, as opposed to when you're speaking to your friends on the playground. Again, so using the correct grammar and punctuation, which we've already spoke about, but I want to reiterate, I want to repeat myself here, that we still need to make sure that we are focusing on the correct spelling and punctuation when we are writing in an informal style, but it just means that the technicality of our words, how complex our words are, they're a lot more formal and complex when we are writing in a formal way. We also use the correct vocabulary. In an informal style of writing, we use this chatty tone, and you'll see an example of that in a letter that I'm going to show you in a minute. Also using maybe text language and slang. Now, I want to repeat again that when we are writing our diary, we're not going to be using lots and lots of slang. I will be showing you examples of things that we'll be writing about today. And the final thing, this is really an important thing to be honest, because using contractions, so you don't have to write we are not going to the beach or something. You might write we're not rather than we are, so that we are is contracted to form the contracted verb of we're. Okay, or abbreviations like TV instead of television. So you might write in your diary when you come to write it, oh, today has been a rubbish day because I haven't been able to watch TV again. As opposed to, today has been absolutely unpleasant because I have had again the horrible circumstance of not being able to watch television. Can you see the difference in my voice there? I think you can probably tell which one was formal and which one was informal. Okay, so now we've looked at the different features between informal or formal language. Can we use this knowledge to decide which sort of language you should use in the following situations? Should you use formal or informal language? Because every time we write and every time we even speak, this has a different purpose. So when I'm speaking to my friends, I speak in an informal way. But if I'm speaking to you, then I speak in a formal way because I want you to really get across what I'm trying to say. But my friends, I have a different purpose for them than I do for our class of year 4. Similarly, if I'm writing a letter to someone really important, then I'm obviously going to make sure that my grammar is absolutely perfect, that I've worded my sentences in a really, really high grammatically worded way. Whereas if I'm writing a diary entry, it's not going to anyone important. So I can use this informal language. Now, I've given you bits of clues here, but can you spend 2 minutes having a think? If you've got someone next to you that you can chat to, fantastic. But have a think. Which of these situations would I use formal language and which would I use informal language? Pause the video now and have a think. Okay, how did you do? Did you figure out that when we talk to our friends, we use informal language? Whereas if we talk to the head teacher, Mr. Day, we would speak in a formal language. Did you also find out that when we write a job application, now that means if you want to work somewhere new, then you need to hand in an application to say, this is why I should work here, this is what I can offer you. Now, if you really, really want the job, you need to make sure you write in a formal tone because that person who receives your application will take you a lot more seriously. Sending a text to a friend. This is like talking to our friends in an informal way. Similarly, we would write a diary entry using informal language. But if we were lucky enough to write a letter to the Queen, then that would have to be formal language too. Okay, great work on that year 4. Now, we are now going to look at the difference in vocabulary between formal language and informal language. Now, in my orange boxes here, I have got examples of formal words, formal languages that we might use. And in this box here, this column, all my blue boxes are full of informal language that I might use. Now, I don't have to use them every time I speak informally or write informally, but this is an example of the difference in vocabulary. Now, they match up to each other. So one of these words, say imagine, will match the meaning of one of our informal words in this column. One of our words, wonderful, will match one of our words here. Now, these are a bit like synonyms, where they would mean the same but have different purposes. So let me show you a first example. So I can see here that I've got my formal word, imagine. Now I can look here and think, does thanks mean the same as imagine? No. Aren't, well, I can see aren't is a contraction, so that has to be looking for the expanded. So no, it's not that. ASAP, no, that is an acronym and that doesn't have any of my letters in the word imagine. Think, when we are imagining something, we often think it. But I'm going to keep having a look because that one I think could mean the same, but I'm going to keep going. Wicked, the word wicked means kind of like, amazing. I'm not going to say the word, but it could be amazing or something else. So it can't mean the same as imagine. And cool and weave couldn't either. So I am going to draw a line from the word imagine to think, because imagine would be my formal vocabulary word and think would be my informal vocabulary word. Now, your second task of today is to match the formal language with the informal language. But remember, you need to read all of the informal examples first to make sure you have eliminated, got rid of, all the answers that are not matching your formal word. Exactly like we do in our reading lessons, we have to read all the possible answers and go through them all before we are certain we have the right answer. So that is your first task of the day. You can either wait till the end of the video to complete this, or you can pause the video now and complete it now. Okay, so we have got 2 emails here and we need to decide, how is their language different and how do we know which one is formal and which one is informal? So my first one is on the left. Dear Sir or Madame, I am writing to inform you of my upset when I opened the Lucky Dip bag I had recently purchased with my own pocket money. I was disappointed to find that my favourite toy brand had been replaced with an inadequate copy, which had even had pieces missing. I shall expect to be fully compensated for the distress and inconvenience this experience has caused me and hope that you send a replacement promptly. Yours sincerely, Miss F. James. Have a think, was that written in a formal style of language or an informal style of language? Let's look at the second example and this might help us. Hi Kerry, you know the Lucky Dip bag I bought when we went into town yesterday? Well, you'll never believe what happened when I opened it. There was a broken copy of the toy instead of a real thing. I was so shocked and annoyed that I've emailed the company to tell them what I think. I hope they send me a new one ASAP so I can complete the set. Was your pack okay? I hope so. See you later, John. Have a think what was different and what might be similar between these two. Just have a think and pause the video, please. Did you notice that the email on the left to Sir or Madame was written in a formal style of language, whereas the email on the right was written in an informal style of language? Let's have a look and see if we can pick out some different vocabulary words to help us decide why it's formal and why it's informal.